The moon did not rise over Sellwater the night I broke my own heart, and did not know it. I stood in the silver hall with the wrong woman's hand in mine, and above the high windows the sky stayed black as a shut eye. No silver on the water, no path of light across the lake that had lain like a road of coins under every moon of my life. I told myself it meant nothing. I was the Alpha King of Sellwater. The moon had crowned my father and his father before him, and it would rise for me when it pleased. I did not yet understand that the moon had never answered to me at all. It had been answering all along to her. Let me tell it the way it happened, because I have earned the telling and she has earned the truth, and I will not soften my own part in it. Sellwater sits where the mountains open their hands and set down a lake so still it holds two skies. Our hold is old, a great hall of pale stone above the water, a terrace where a moon garden has grown for 400 years, silver leaf and night flower that open only under the full moon and close by dawn. My people are wolves, and the moon is our mother. On the night the moon comes full above the lake, the water rises to meet it, and the pack stands on the shore and feels the tide of it pull in their blood. That tide is the oldest thing we have. When I was a boy, my father set his hand on my shoulder at the water's edge and said, "One day you will feel it choose. When the moon means to give this hold its queen, it will pull toward her, and you will know." I remembered those words the way you remember a lesson you were too young to need. I did not think I would need them yet. I was newly crowned, my father a year in the ground, and I ruled a hold that watched me the way packs watch a young king, waiting to see if the stone would hold his weight. I meant to prove it would. I meant to be strong and clear and never wrong. Pride, I have since learned, is only fear that has put on a crown. There were two women in my hall that year. One was Kasia. She had come from a hold 3 ridges east, sent by her father with a train of gifts and a smile that never once faltered, and she filled a room the way a torch fills a dark stair. She laughed at the right moments. She knew the names of every elder and the weakness of every rival, and she gave them to me like sweets. When she walked the length of the silver hall, the court turned to watch her, and I confess I liked to be watched beside her. She made me feel like the king I was pretending to be. When she spoke of the coming moon right, the great night when a young king's fated queen was said to be revealed to him, she spoke of it as a thing already decided, as if the moon and she had come to an understanding I need only sign. The other was Eloin. She had been at Sellwater since before I was king, since we were both children if I am honest, though I had trained myself not to be. Her mother had kept the moon garden, and when her mother died Eloin kept it, and no one thought to give her any grander name than that, the girl who keeps the garden. She was quiet in the way still water is quiet, not empty, deep. She moved through the hall without seeming to disturb the air, and she was always, I came to realize much later, near me. When I was a boy learning to swim, she pulled me up by the collar out of the cold and said nothing of it to anyone. When my father was dying, she sat outside his door through the night so that if he called, someone would hear. When I was crowned and my hands shook under the weight of the old moon torque, she was the one who had polished it until it caught the light, though I did not know that then. I knew only that she was there, the way the garden was there, the way the lake was there, a part of Sellwater I had never once thought to thank. I will tell you the thing I have to live with. The moon leaned toward her and I saw it, and I called it a trick of the water. On the nights I walked the terrace, the moonlight fell strongest wherever she stood. If she knelt at the garden, the silver gathered on her hands. If she crossed the hall, the beam through the high window bent, I swear it bent to follow her to the door. There was a pull in me on those nights, low and constant, a tide behind my ribs that dragged toward wherever she was in the hold, and I did not name it. I was young and proud, and I had decided, without letting myself decide it, that my queen would be the one the court admired, not the one who smelled of garden earth and stood at the edges of rooms. So when the tide pulled, I turned from it. I told myself it was the moon on the lake. I told myself a king chooses, he is not chosen. I have never told a bigger lie, and I told it only to myself, which is the worst place to tell one. The moon right was 3 nights away, when Kasia came to me with the token. I remember the hall was near empty, the fires banked low, and she crossed to my chair with something cupped in both hands as though she carried water she was afraid to spill. She opened her fingers, and there on her palm lay a moonstone, old, milky, threaded with silver, and it was glowing. Faint but glowing, a soft cold light like the moon caught small. "It woke in my hands," she said, and her voice trembled, and I believed the tremble. "In my sleep. I did not do anything, Alaric. I woke and it was shining. The keeper, old Halda, she says the moonstone only wakes for the moon's chosen. She says it wakes for the queen." I looked at the stone, and I felt something in me go cold and quiet, and I mistook the cold for certainty. Here, I thought, here is the sign. Here is the moon telling me plainly, so I need not trust that troublesome tide behind my ribs, so I need not wonder about the girl in the garden. The moon has spoken, and it has spoken sensibly, and it has chosen the woman the whole court would cheer. "Then the moon has chosen," I said, and Kasia's face broke open into a joy so bright I did not think to look for anything behind it. I should have gone to Halda. Halda had kept the moon lore of Selwater since before my father was born. She was half-blind and wholly certain, and she had never once flattered me. If I had gone to her and asked, plainly, what wakes a moonstone, she would have told me. But I did not go, because some part of me already suspected the answer would not be the one I wanted, and I did not want to be told I was wrong. That is the whole of it. I did not ask the question because I feared the answer. A king who fears the answer has no business asking anything and no business ruling. I know that now. I did not know it then, and Selwater paid for what I did not know. The night of the choosing came before the rite, the night a young king names before his court the one he means to stand beside at the water when the moon comes full. It is meant to be a small thing, a formality, the king confirming what the moon has already made plain. My hall was full. Torches doubled themselves in the black windows. Kasia stood at the front in silver, radiant, the woken moonstone at her throat on a chain for all to see, and the court's eyes went to her and stayed, and I felt like a king. Eloan was at the back, near the terrace doors, in the plain gray she always wore, and there was garden earth still on her hands because she had come straight from closing the night flowers. And I remember, God help me, I remember that the moonlight through the high window had bent again to fall across her where she stood, so that she alone in that crowded blazing hall was lit by something colder and older than the torches. I saw it. I saw the silver find her. And I turned my face away from it, and I took Kasia's hand and lifted it, and I said the words. Before my hall and before the moon, I name the one who will stand at the water with me when the moon comes full. I named Kasia. I did not look at Eloan. That is the cruelty I cannot dress up. I did not look at the woman I was casting aside. I looked at the woman I was choosing because I could not have done it if I had looked. The hall roared its approval. Kasia turned her radiant face up to mine, and in the noise, in the light, I heard one small sound from the back of the hall, the terrace door, opening and closing, and I told myself I had imagined it, and I let her go into the dark. That was the night the moon did not rise. We stood on the shore at the full, and the sky stayed black. The water did not lift. There was no road of silver, no tide in the blood, nothing, a dead flat lake under a starless dark, and my whole pack standing on the stones with their faces turning to me, waiting for me to tell them what it meant, and I had no answer. Kasia's hand was cold in mine. The moonstone at her throat had gone dark as a river stone, and she kept touching it, kept turning it, and I saw the first crack of fear go across her bright face. "It will rise," I said to my people with all the false certainty I had. "The moon is testing our patience. It will rise." It did not rise, not that night nor the next, and by the fourth day the moon garden began to die. I want you to understand what that meant, because it was not only flowers. The moon garden of Selwater had never in 400 years failed to open under the moon. Now the silver leaf curled brown at the edges, and the night flowers drew shut and would not open again, and the lake below sank and stilled and began to smell of stone left too long in the sun, and the wolves of my pack grew restless and thin-tempered, snapping at nothing, unable to sleep, as though the tide that ran in all of us had been dammed. My people came to me. "What have we done?" they asked. And I did not know, and I could not say I did not know, so I said less and less. And a king who says less when his people ask more is a king already losing his hold. And through all of it, one thing steadied. Wherever Eloin walked, the blight eased. I did not want to see it, so of course I saw it. Where she knelt in the dying garden, the silver leaf under her hands did not curl, it held green. The night flowers by the path she took to the water stayed open a little longer than the rest. When she carried water up from the sinking lake, the water in her jar was clear when the rest had gone brackish. My people began to notice before I let myself notice. They began to go to her quietly, ashamed, as though asking a servant for a thing they should have asked their king, and they came away calmer. She would not take any credit for it. She only kept working, kept the garden as much of it as she could keep. And when I passed her on the terrace, she lowered her eyes and stepped aside for me, the man who had cast her off in front of the whole hall, and she said nothing. It was Halda who finally said it, because Halda has never in her long life been afraid of a king. She came to my chair on the 5th night of the dark moon, tapping her way with her stick. Her white eyes turned somewhere past my shoulder, and she did not bow. "You ask me nothing," she said. "Halda, you had a moonstone brought before you and you asked me nothing. You had a queen to name and you asked the moonkeeper of Sellwater nothing. So I will tell you now what you did not want to hear then." She struck her stick once against the stone floor. That stone did not wake for the moon's chosen. A moonstone can be woken by any clever hand that knows to hold it against warm skin through a cold night and rub the old silver salt into it till it glows. It is a trick, Alaric. A market trick. Peddlers do it to sell trinkets to fools. Her blind face turned toward me, and I have never felt so seen by anyone who could not see. You were sold a trick because you wished to be, and in wishing it, you turned your back on the moon's own daughter and named the trick your queen. And now the moon has turned its face from Sellwater, and it will not turn back until you understand why. The cold in me was not certainty this time. It was dread. "The garden," I said. My voice did not sound like a king's. "Eloin, the blight eases where she walks, yes." Halda's mouth was hard. "You have felt it your whole life and named it the water. The moon leans to her. It has always leaned to her. Her mother kept the garden and her mother's mother, and every one of them the moon favored, waiting, boy, for the one it meant to crown. Do you know what a moon queen is? Not a woman a king lifts up. A woman the moon chooses and gifts the tide of the whole hold into her keeping, so that where she is, Sellwater lives, and where she is scorned, Sellwater dies." She leaned close. "You did not merely break a girl's heart. You stood before your people, and you cast out the future moon queen of Sellwater for a trinket and a smile. And the moon saw you do it, and it has put out its light rather than shine on a king so blind. I do not remember standing. I remember that I was at the terrace doors, and the dying garden was gray in the starlight, and I was looking for her, and she was there. Of course she was there. She was always there, kneeling at the edge of the moon garden with her hands cupped around a single night flower that had, alone in all that dying, opened under her fingers. It glowed the faintest silver, and the light of it was on her face, and I understood all at once and all too late that I had seen this 100 times and called it nothing. I could not go to her. What could I say? I had stood in my full hall and named another before the moon and my whole pack, with the earth of her garden still on her hands 3 steps from the door. There is no walking that back with a soft word. I stood in the doorway like a coward, and I watched the woman I had wronged coax life out of a dying flower, and the tide behind my ribs that I had spent a year calling a trick of the water pulled toward her so hard it took the breath out of me, and I finally let myself feel it for what it was. Mine. She was meant to be mine, and I had thrown her into the dark, and now the moon itself would not forgive me until she did. Kasia found me on the terrace an hour later, and the mask had begun to slip. Her radiance had a brittleness in it now, a shine like ice about to break. "It will pass," she said, and her hand went to the dark stone at her throat. "The moon is only slow. Once we are wed, once you are seen to be certain, the court will steady, and—" "The stone was a trick," I said. She went very still. "Halda told me what wakes a moonstone. You woke it, salt and a warm hand in a cold night. You brought me a peddler's trick and told me the moon had chosen, and my voice failed and I made it work. I wanted it to be true, so I asked nothing. So this is mine to carry, but I will not carry your lie inside it. Tell me the truth. Did you know about Aloan, about what she is?" For a moment I thought she would keep the mask on. Then it came off, all at once, the way a mask does when the person under it is tired of holding it up, and what was underneath was not a monster. That is the part I did not expect. It was only fear and ambition, and a girl who had been told her whole life that she was worth exactly as much as the throne she could reach. "Everyone knew," she said, low and bitter. "Everyone at Sellwater knew the garden keepers were moon-favored. I heard it my first week here old women whispering that if the moon ever meant to crown a queen, it would be one of them. So yes, I knew what she might be. And I saw the way the light went to her, and I saw that you did not want to see it, and she lifted her chin, and there was something almost brave in how plainly she said the ugly thing. I gave you a reason not to. That is all I did, Alaric. I did not force your hand. You wanted to choose me. I only made it easy. You cast her out, not me." "You—" She was right, and we both knew she was right, and that is why I did not rage at her. There is no righteousness in a betrayed man's anger when he did the betraying. I sent her from the hall not cruelly but plainly. Her father's hold could take her back with her honor, for the fault was mine, and I would say so publicly, and I did. But her words stayed in me like a splinter that has gone in past the skin. You cast her out. Not me. You. The moonlight was 2 nights away, the great full moon of the year, the night the tide runs highest, the night that in the old days crowned the queen. Everyone knew now what I had done. It had gone through the hold like water finding cracks. Some of my people would not meet my eyes. Some looked at me with a pity worse than anger. And all of them had begun quietly to look to Aloan to stand a little straighter when she passed, to bring their sick children to the garden gate, to leave small things on the terrace wall where she would find them. A comb, a loaf, a folded cloth, the shy offerings a pack leaves for the one it has begun to understand is its true heart. She took none of it for herself. She left the bread for the birds and the cloth folded where it lay. She kept the garden. She waited. I went to her the night before the rite, because I could not go to the rite itself without going to her first. Whatever the moon meant to do, I would not stand at that water again having said nothing to her. I owed her the words, even if the words changed nothing, even if she spat them back at me, which she would have had every right to do. She was in the garden, of course, in the gray dark, closing what few flowers still opened. She heard me on the stone, and she rose and stepped aside and lowered her eyes. That same deference, that habit of a lifetime of being no one's queen, and it undid me more than any rebuke could have. "Don't," I said, "don't step aside for me, not you." She looked up then, and I saw in her face that she was not surprised by any of it, not the blight, not Halda's words, not the whole hold turning toward her. She had known. Some part of her had always known what she was, and had carried it in silence her whole life, because no one at Sellwater had ever thought the garden girl worth asking. That was almost the worst of it. She had known she might be the moon's queen, and she had knelt in the dirt for me anyway, and pulled me out of the cold lake by the collar when we were children, and sat outside my dying father's door, and polished my crown, and loved me. She had loved me. I understood it in that garden with a clarity that shamed me, and I had named another before the whole hall 3 steps from where she stood. "You have nothing to say to me that will make it a different thing than it was," she said. Not cruel, just true. Her voice was steady and quiet, and it went through me like cold water. "You stood in your hall, Alaric. I was at the door. I saw your face when the light found me, and I saw you turn away from it. You did not simply fail to choose me. You saw the moon choose me and you chose against it." She drew a breath. "I do not tell you this to wound you. I tell you because you came here for soft words and I have none. What was done cannot be undone by wanting it undone." "I know," I said. "I did not come for soft words. I came to say I was wrong plainly so that you have heard me say it before the moon does whatever it will do tomorrow. Not so you'll forgive me. So that whatever you become, you'll know the man who wronged you knew it, fully, in his own words. I was a coward and a fool and I chose a lie because the lie was easy and you were true and true is hard to look at when you're afraid. The blight is mine. The dark moon is mine. If Sellwater dies, it dies because of me, not because of anything you did. And whatever the moon means to give you tomorrow, it is yours by right, and I will kneel to it, and I will not put out my hand for anything you do not first choose to give. You will not be chosen again against your will. Not by me. Never again by me." She was quiet for a long time. The single open night flower glowed between us. And then she said the thing I have kept all these years, the thing I did not deserve and have spent my life trying to become worthy of. "You are closer to a king now saying that," she said softly, "than you were the night you wore the crown." Then she closed the last flower and went in and left me alone in the dying garden with the whole weight of what I was. The night of the moonrise, my people gathered on the shore of the sinking lake under a sky still black. There is no describing the fear of a pack that has watched its moon go dark. They stood close together on the cold stones, families holding one another, the old ones murmuring the moon words that had not been answered in a fortnight, the children too frightened to cry. I stood at the front where a king stands, and I have never felt less like a king, and I did not pretend otherwise. When they looked to me, I did not give them false certainty. I gave them the truth. "The moon turned its face from Sellwater because of me," I said, and my voice carried out over the still water. "I named a lie my queen and cast out the moon's own daughter, and the moon will not shine on such blindness. Tonight I make it right the only way it can be made right. Not by command. A king cannot command the moon, and he should never have thought he could command the heart of anyone who serves him. Tonight I stand aside. Tonight Sellwater's queen is named by the only voice that ever had the right to name her." And I stepped back from the water's edge, back into the crowd, and I turned with all of them to look for her. She came down through the dying garden in the gray dark, in her plain clothes, with the earth of Sellwater on her hands, and she walked to the edge of the black and lifted her face to the empty sky. And the moon rose. It did not rise the way it had risen every night of my life, a slow climb over the eastern ridge. It came up out of the lake itself. The black water paled, and then a low silver light woke in the deeps and rose, and the surface of the lake lifted. I felt the tide come back into my own blood in that instant. The whole pack gasped with one breath as the damned thing in us broke free and ran, and the water rose toward her, gathering, climbing, until it stood in a great trembling silver arc at her feet, and out of it and above it the moon lifted whole and enormous and nearer than I had ever seen it. And it did not shine on Sellwater, it shone on her. Every beam of it bent, the way the light in my hall had always bent, the way I had always known it did and always denied. It bent and came down and gathered on Aloan where she stood at the water's edge, until she was the only lit thing in a silver dark, until she blazed. And across her collarbone, up her throat, over the backs of her earth-stained hands, a mark bloomed, silver and moving like light on water, like the tide made into a mark, the moon's own sign, waking on the skin of the woman it had waited 400 years to crown. The dying garden behind her opened all at once, every shut flower flinging wide, silver leaf greening from brown, the whole terrace flooding into bloom in the space of a breath. The lake filled. The tide ran high and clean. And my people, my whole pack, went down onto the cold stones on their knees, not because any king told them to, but because the moon had, and there is no standing before that. Halda's voice came out of the dark, cracked and triumphant, the moon words she had waited her whole long life to say. "The moon has crowned its queen. Sellwater, kneel to the one you overlooked. The garden keeper's daughter is the Moon Queen, and the tide of this hold is in her keeping now, as it was always meant to be. I was already kneeling. I had gone down with the rest, but it was not the rest I knelt for. I knelt for her. And when the great light steadied and she lowered her face from the moon and looked out at her hold on its knees before her, her eyes found me last, kneeling in the crowd where a king does not kneel, and I did not look away this time. I made myself hold it. I let her see me see her. And I will tell you what she did, because it is the thing I love her for above all the rest. She could have let me kneel. By every right in the world she could have left me down on the stones with the tide of my whole hold running through her and never given me another word, and no one, not Halda, not the pack, not the moon, would have named it anything but justice. Casha's words would have been the last word after all. You cast her out, not me, you. I had thrown her into the dark, and the dark had given her a crown, and she owed me nothing but the back of her hand. She crossed the stones to where I knelt. The silver mark moved on her throat like living water. The whole hold watched, and she stopped before me, and she did not lift me. I want to be clear. She did not lift me. The choice was hers, and she did not rush to it. She only looked at me for a long moment, weighing me, the way you weigh a thing you have been hurt by and are deciding whether to trust again. You knelt, she said quietly, so only I could hear. You stood before them and named it your fault, and you stepped aside, and you did not put out your hand. Her mouth moved, not quite a smile, something more careful than a smile. The man who wore the crown a year ago could not have done any of that. He'd have found a way to make it mine to fix. She tilted her head. You've become someone else. I felt it in the garden last night. I feel it now. Eloin. I'm not going to tell you I forget it, she said. I won't. What you did I will carry as long as I live, the same as you will. That is honest, and I will only build a thing that is honest. She drew a breath, and the moon steadied on her, and she said, But the moon has made me sovereign of Selwater, and the first thing I mean to do as its queen is to choose for myself what I was never once let to choose, not to be named. To name. She held out her hand, not to be helped up, but to me, offered the choosing in her fingers where mine had been the night I did the wrong thing. Stand up, Alaric, stand beside me, not because the moon chose it, because I do. I took her hand and I stood, and the tide ran high and bright through both of us, and the whole hold of Selwater rose from its knees around its Moon Queen, and above the lake the moon shone whole and forgiving on the water it had darkened for my sake. Casha was gone by then, sent east to her father's hold with the truth of the trick spoken plainly and her honor left to her, for the fault had been mine to confess, and I had confessed it. The court that had turned to watch her cross a room now could not meet the eyes of the queen they had let stand at the back of the hall in earth-stained gray, and Eloin, who had every reason for scorn, gave them none. She only set them to work restoring the garden they had let her tend alone, which was a mercy sharper than any punishment, because it made them learn with their own hands what she had carried by herself for years. We were not wed that season. She would not be rushed toward me the way I had once rushed toward the lie, and she was right, and I did not press. A king who has learned anything has learned to wait for a thing to be freely given. I courted the Moon Queen of Selwater the slow, plain way by keeping. I learned her garden. I learned which flowers open late and which will not open if you touch them, and how the silver leaf must be turned toward the water, and I knelt in the dirt beside her through 100 moons with the earth of Selwater on my own hands until they were as marked with it as hers, and somewhere in all that kneeling and keeping the thing between us grew back. Not the old thing that was gone and should be, but a new thing, chosen on both sides, with its eyes open. I am an old man now, and the moon has never once failed to rise over Selwater in all the long years of her reign. The garden has never dimmed. The tide runs high and clean. And every full moon still I go down before her to the shore where she was crowned, and I feel that old pull behind my ribs turn toward her the way it did when I was young and too proud to name it. And I name it now, aloud, every time, so I never forget again what it cost me to learn. And then I climb back up to the terrace, to the moon garden that she keeps still and that I keep with her, and I close the night flowers at her side. And when the last one shuts, I say to her the only vow that was ever worth the saying. I will never again turn my face from the light when it finds you. She always answers the same. She sets her earth-stained hand over mine, the silver mark of the moon moving on her skin like the tide it holds, and she says, I know. That is why I chose you. And the moon rises over Sellwater, and the water lifts to meet it, and it shines at last. For all its long patience, it shines on both of us together.